January 26, 1945. The village of Holtzwihr, France. A young American lieutenant stood alone in the frozen snow, watching as 6 German tank destroyers and 250 infantry emerged from the morning mist. Within the next hour, this 20-year-old officer would write one of the most extraordinary chapters in American military history. But what makes this story truly remarkable is not just what happened on that battlefield, but who this man was, and what he would become. This is the story of Audie Murphy, at Holtzwihr, and in this video, we'll examine not only the legendary events of that January day, but the journey that brought a Texas farm boy to that frozen field, and the demons that would haunt him long after the guns fell silent. Before we begin, I want to show you something. Using modern mapping technology and historical records, I've identified the exact location where Murphy made his stand. The woods, the road, the burning tank destroyer. All of it can be traced to within yards of where it happened 80 years ago. The landscape has changed, but the ground remembers. Now let's go back to where it all started. Audie Leon Murphy was born on June 20, 1925 in Kingston, Texas, the 7th of 12 children born to sharecroppers. Murphy grew up in grinding poverty that most Americans today cannot imagine. His father abandoned the family when Audie was young. His mother died when he was just 16. By the time Pearl Harbor was attacked, Murphy had already been working to support his younger siblings, hunting small game with a borrowed rifle to put food on the table. When Murphy tried to enlist after Pearl Harbor, he was rejected by the Marines and the paratroopers. He was too small, 5 feet 5 inches tall, 112 pounds, baby-faced and slight. He looked like a strong wind might blow him over. The army finally accepted him in June 1942, 3 weeks after his 17th birthday. His sister had to falsify his age because he was still underage. Nothing about Audie Murphy suggested he would become America's most decorated soldier. Nothing except one thing. When Murphy picked up a rifle, something happened. He was a natural marksman, gifted with uncanny eyesight, and reflexes honed by years of hunting to survive. More than that, he possessed something that cannot be taught: a coldness under fire, an ability to think clearly when others panicked. Murphy landed in North Africa with Company B, 15th Infantry Regiment, 3rd Infantry Division in February 1943. He was 18 years old. Over the next 30 months, he would fight in 9 major campaigns across North Africa, Sicily, Italy, France and Germany, and with each campaign, the legend would grow. In Sicily, Murphy single-handedly charged a German machine gun nest that had pinned down his platoon. In Italy, at Anzio, he killed 2 German machine gun teams and held a position alone for over an hour. During the invasion of southern France, he killed or captured over 100 enemy soldiers in a series of actions that earned him a battlefield commission to second lieutenant. By January 1945, Murphy had been wounded 3 times. He'd contracted malaria. He'd developed gangrene from a hip wound and had to be forcibly evacuated to a hospital, only to discharge himself and return to his unit weeks before doctors cleared him. He'd earned the Distinguished Service Cross, 2 Silver Stars, and 3 Purple Hearts. He'd gone from private to lieutenant in less than 2 years, and he was still only 19 years old. Now here's something that often gets overlooked in discussions of Murphy's career. By early 1945, he was already showing signs of what we would today call PTSD. He had recurring nightmares. He couldn't sleep without checking the perimeter. Fellow soldiers noticed he'd become quieter, more withdrawn between actions. Yet when the shooting started, Murphy transformed. Cool, calculating, deadly. The question I want you to consider is this: was Murphy's effectiveness as a soldier connected to his psychological state, or did the trauma come later, after the accumulation of too many battles, too many losses, too much killing? Leave your thoughts in the comments. I'm genuinely curious what you think about this. By late January 1945, Company B of the 15th Infantry was engaged in operations to clear the Colmar Pocket, the last major German stronghold in France. The unit had been in heavy combat for days. Company's strength had been reduced from over 100 men to just 40 effectives. Murphy, who had entered the war as a private in this same company, now commanded it as a second lieutenant. On the morning of January 26, Company B held a position along a woodline outside Holtzwihr. The position was precarious. The ground was frozen solid, making it nearly impossible to dig proper foxholes. German forces held the northern end of the village, just 400 yards away. The fields between the American position and the village formed a deadly no-man's land. Murphy had positioned his men carefully. 2 M10 tank destroyers provided their main armored support. One was stationed on the road leading from the woods toward the village. The second sat about 40 yards ahead, closer to Holtzwihr. Murphy himself had set up his command post in a drainage ditch along the main road, about 10 yards ahead of the rear tank destroyer. He was armed with his M1 carbine, a pair of binoculars, a map, and a field telephone connected to artillery support. The American main line was nearly a mile to the rear, waiting for reinforcements before moving up. Murphy knew that if the Germans counterattacked in force, his understrength company would be in serious trouble. He ordered his men to prepare a fallback position deeper in the woods, where they could find better cover. At 2 p.m., the sound Murphy had been dreading rolled across the frozen fields, the rumble of engines. From the mist-covered village of Holtzwihr emerged 6 German Jagdpanther tank destroyers, formidable vehicles mounting 88mm guns. Behind them came approximately 250 infantry, camouflaged in white against the snow, advancing in skirmish lines. German artillery began falling on the American positions. Murphy immediately called for his men to prepare to withdraw. At the same time, he used his field telephone to call in artillery fire on the approaching enemy. The situation deteriorated rapidly. A German shell struck the rear M10 tank destroyer, killing the commander and gunner. The vehicle began billowing black smoke. The surviving crew abandoned it and ran for the rear under heavy fire. The forward M10 continued firing, its 90mm gun barking as it tried to engage the German armor. Murphy watched in dismay as the shells struck the frontal armor of the Jagdpanthers and ricocheted harmlessly away. The American tank destroyer began backing up, trying to reach the cover of the trees. Then disaster struck. The M10 slid into the drainage ditch and became stuck at an angle that made its main gun useless. Sergeant Hines and his crew had no choice but to abandon it. Company B was now alone, facing 6 tank destroyers and 250 infantry with nothing but small arms and whatever artillery support Murphy could call in. Murphy made the decision. The company would fall back to the prepared position in the woods. He would stay at the command post to direct artillery fire and cover their withdrawal. Let me pause here to give you some technical context. The M10 tank destroyer that Murphy would soon climb aboard was burning, but it still had a functional M2 Browning 50 caliber heavy machine gun mounted on the turret ring. This weapon fired 450 to 575 rounds per minute, with an effective range of 1,800 meters. Each round carried tremendous kinetic energy, capable of penetrating light armor and devastating exposed infantry. The German forces advancing on Murphy's position had every reason to be confident. They had overwhelming superiority in numbers and firepower. A single American officer, even one as skilled as Murphy, should not have been able to stop them. But the Germans were about to encounter something they hadn't fully accounted for. Not just Murphy's skill, but his absolute refusal to accept defeat. As Company B withdrew into the woods, Murphy stayed at his command post under a pine tree at the edge of the wood line. German tanks and infantry poured forward, firing continuously. Shells and machine gun rounds shattered tree branches around Murphy's position. He stayed on the field telephone, calmly calling in artillery coordinates, his carbine beside him ready for use. The German armor bypassed Murphy's position, apparently wanting to avoid the burning M10. They came within 50 yards, so close Murphy could see the faces of the tank commanders in their kumblers. German infantry began advancing past the tanks, moving toward the American lines. Murphy emptied his carbine into the approaching enemy, firing until he'd spent all his ammunition. Then he made a decision that defied all military logic. He moved forward, climbed onto the burning M10 tank destroyer, and swung the turret-mounted 50 caliber machine gun toward the advancing Germans. Think about what this meant. The M10 was burning. It could explode at any moment. Murphy was completely exposed, silhouetted against the bare trees and the fire beneath him. He had no cover whatsoever. German tanks, infantry, artillery, all were firing at his position, and he climbed up anyway. For the next hour, Murphy held that position. The Plon 50 caliber thundered continuously, raining fire into the German infantry. Men fell, others went to ground. The German advance stalled. Murphy alternated between firing and calling in artillery strikes, directing fire onto enemy concentrations with uncanny accuracy. The smoke from the burning tank destroyer provided some concealment, but Murphy was still clearly visible to anyone who looked for the source of that devastating fire. The German infantry tried repeatedly to advance. Each time, Murphy's fire drove them back. Twice, German tank rounds slammed into the M10, engulfing it in clouds of smoke and flame. Each time, Murphy reappeared and continued firing. Artillery shells burst around the tank destroyer. Machine gun rounds clanged off the armored hull. Murphy kept firing. At one point, a group of 12 German soldiers worked their way through the drainage ditch, trying to flank Murphy's position. They got within 10 yards before Murphy spotted them through the smoke. He swung the 50 caliber around and cut them down at point-blank range. All 12 died in seconds. The field telephone rang. The artillery observer wanted to know how close the Germans were. Murphy's reply would become legendary. "Hold the phone and I'll let you talk to one of the bastards." He then gave coordinates for artillery fire on his own position. Better to risk American shrapnel than let the Germans overrun the line. Lieutenant Walter Weifening, an artillery forward observer who had relocated to Company B's position, watched Murphy's stand from the wood line. His account, recorded shortly after the battle, captures what happened. I saw Lieutenant Murphy do the bravest thing I've ever seen any man do in combat. With the Germans only 100 yards away and still moving up on him, he climbed onto that burning tank destroyer and began firing the 50 caliber machine gun. There he was, completely exposed, silhouetted against the background of bare trees and snow, with fire under him that could blow the destroyer and its 90mm shells sky high any second. Machine gun, machine pistol, and rifle fire were crashing all around him. Murphy had been wounded. A bullet had reopened an old leg injury, and blood soaked through his uniform. He ignored it. He continued firing, calling in artillery, adjusting fire, methodically destroying the German attack. The psychological impact on the German forces was devastating. They had numerical superiority, armored support, and artillery, yet they could not advance. That single .50 caliber machine gun, operated by one wounded lieutenant, had created a kill zone they could not cross. Officers tried to rally their men. The infantry would rise to advance. Then that terrible hammering would start again, and men would fall, and the attack would stall. After nearly an hour, Murphy's ammunition began running low. The German attack was faltering, but they were still in strength around his position. He called back to Company B for a counterattack. Then, methodically, he climbed down from the burning tank destroyer and made his way back to the American lines. He was still under fire. Bullets kicked up snow around his feet. He walked, didn't run, back to his men. Minutes after Murphy left the tank destroyer, its ammunition exploded. Had he remained in position even 2 minutes longer, he would have been killed instantly. Murphy refused medical evacuation. His leg was treated in the field. Then he reorganized Company B and led them in a counterattack that drove the Germans back into Holtzwihr. Only after the position was secure did he finally accept first aid. The official report documented that Murphy had inflicted approximately 50 casualties on the attacking force through his personal actions. The German assault, which should have overrun the American position, had been completely broken. Here's what often gets lost in the telling of this story. Murphy's Medal of Honor action at Holtzwihr was not an isolated incident of courage. It was the culmination of 30 months of nearly continuous combat. By this point in the war, Murphy had been in so many firefights, survived so many close calls, seen so many friends killed, that something fundamental had changed in him. The fear that would paralyze most men had been burned out of him. What remained was a kind of cold calculation, an ability to assess a tactical situation and execute whatever needed to be done, regardless of personal risk. Was this heroism? Absolutely. Was it also something darker, a kind of psychological adaptation to unendurable stress? Probably that too. The line between courage and trauma is not as clear as we might like to think. Murphy received the Medal of Honor from Lieutenant General Alexander Patch on June 2, 1945, near Salzburg, Austria. The citation praised his indomitable courage and his refusal to give an inch of ground, which saved his company from possible encirclement and destruction, and enabled it to hold the woods which had been the enemy's objective. By war's end, Murphy had received 33 U.S. military awards and decorations, including the Medal of Honor, Distinguished Service Cross, 2 Silver Stars, Legion of Merit, and 3 Purple Hearts. He had also received 5 awards from France and Belgium. He was, and remains, the most decorated American combat soldier of World War II. Murphy returned to the United States in August 1945, just days after his 21st birthday. He was released from active duty in September. He was a national hero, famous, celebrated, and he was completely unprepared for civilian life. The war had changed Murphy in ways that would never heal. He suffered from what we would now call severe PTSD. He had recurring nightmares, often violent. He slept with a loaded pistol under his pillow for the rest of his life. He developed an addiction to sleeping pills. He had episodes of depression and anxiety that he struggled to control. Murphy became an actor, appearing in over 40 films including To Hell and Back, based on his own autobiography. He was successful by conventional measures, but the demons never left him. He was open about his struggles, unusual for that era. He advocated for better treatment of veterans suffering from what was then called battle fatigue. He spoke publicly about the invisible wounds of war at a time when such honesty was considered weakness. Murphy's post-war struggles raise uncomfortable questions about the cost of heroism. We celebrate the Medal of Honor action at Holtzwihr, rightly so, but what was the price Murphy paid for that hour on the burning tank destroyer, for all those months of combat, for all the killing he had to do to survive? On May 28, 1971, Murphy was aboard a twin-engine Aero Commander, traveling from DeKalb, Georgia to Martinsville, Virginia. The aircraft encountered bad weather and struck a mountain near Roanoke, Virginia. All 6 people aboard were killed. Audie Murphy was 45 years old. He was buried with full military honors at Arlington National Cemetery on June 7. In accordance with his wishes, his headstone bears the standard inscription, without the gold lettering reserved for Medal of Honor recipients. Even in death, Murphy preferred to be remembered as an ordinary soldier. Today, Murphy's gravesite is the second most visited at Arlington, after President Kennedy's. Visitors leave flowers, coins, notes. Many are veterans who understand, perhaps better than most, what Murphy's service cost him. The story of Audie Murphy at Holtzwihr is often told as a tale of superhuman courage, and it was that, but it's also a story about what war does to young men, about the price of survival, about the invisible wounds that never heal. Murphy climbed onto that burning tank destroyer on January 26, 1945, and won the Medal of Honor. But in another sense, he never really left that battlefield. The ghosts of Holtzwihr followed him home. The lesson of Murphy's life is not that war creates heroes. It's that heroes are human beings who carry the burden of their actions long after the shooting stops. Murphy's courage at Holtzwihr saved American lives and earned him the nation's highest honor. But courage cannot protect you from memory. Medals cannot silence the nightmares. Audie Murphy's story deserves to be remembered, not just for what he did on that frozen field in France, but for what he lived with afterward. The complete story, the heroism and the cost. Thank you for watching.